Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, scientists, writers, educators, social scientists, and government leaders. We meet each one to one. As we approach the end of a seemingly endless political cycle and speculate about next year's, who's better to guide us than Micheline Blum, Distinguished Lecturer and Director of Survey Research at Baruch College's School of Public Affairs, and a veteran of many a political campaign. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mickey, last night we had the first televised debate between the mayoral candidates, Bill Thompson and Mike Bloomberg. I was not able to watch them, but I gather you did. How did they come off?
Indeed. Well, I think nobody really scored a knockout punch, but I think the fact that Bill Thompson did at least as well as the mayor and stood toe-to-toe with him and appeared to be, his equal on the stage has to help Bill Thompson because at the up until now, it's been all Bloomberg, and you were either for Bloomberg or against Bloomberg, but Bill Thompson sort of hasn't really been part of the
He's been sort of like a shadow candidate almost,
yeah.
because Bloomberg has so much more money to spend. But last night, I assume people were able to really see Thompson and see how he matched up against the mayor.
Yes, and I think that up until now, Bill Thompson hasn't been out there. Perhaps after 8 years, it's surprising he's actually not that well known. But last night he gave a he gave a good performance. He did well. He certainly got sort of through to the mayor on the whole term limits issue. I think there were things he could have done better than he did, but that's probably always true. I think, however, this was a pretty good performance for Bill Thompson. It's about as good as I've ever seen him.
And he probably had a lot more to gain from the debate than the mayor did.
He had much more to gain. People didn't know him. When you're the underdog, when you're the less known candidate, you have nowhere to go but up, really, in a debate. And I would not be surprised to see at least some bump in the polls for him.
I get the sense, and I think you've actually done some polling research on this, that a lot of New Yorkers are very annoyed with Mike Bloomberg for his in-run around term limits. Is that true, and is that likely to hurt him in any significant way?
It is absolutely true. It bothers people. And one of the questions we've asked has been, do you think less of, whether you think less of the mayor because of that? And in fact, a lot of people in New York sort of thought less of him for having done that. But that said, doesn't mean that they're not going to vote for him, doesn't mean that they don't think he's done a good job as mayor. I mean, he still gets amazing approval ratings.
Really? What's his, what his numbers are?
In the high 60s.
Okay.
So, I mean, he still does really well. And people probably will still vote for him because when it comes down to it, term limits isn't the thing that affects their lives as much as other things. So while I think that Thompson is right to harp on it because it does bother people, and there are people who are going to vote on that whole 8 is enough, is that enough to win? I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I think the mayor, the last that I read was that Mayor Bloomberg has spent $65 million of his own money on his campaign. I think about 16 times what Bill Thompson has spent. Do you think he should have abided by the campaign spending limits instead of opening his own wallet in that way?
Well, I don't know that it's for me to say whether he should have, but I think there certainly are people who are upset by the amount of money, which may seem like an obscene amount of money to spend on a campaign. On the other hand, he's an extremely wealthy man. He gives a lot to charity. He's extremely philanthropic, and it's his money to spend. And what's been interesting is that over the years, New Yorkers have not held it against him that he was a billionaire. In fact, to some extent, they think it makes him incorruptible.
Well, that was how I thought of him originally. I'm glad the mayor's wealthy, so he can't be bought, by these special interest groups. But from time to time, I hear people who sort of feel that he is buying the city.
Mm-hmm. And that's been an interesting thing, and that was something that Bill Thompson was trying to sort of bring up, that the pay to play usually is seen as somebody paying, giving money to a candidate, and then a candidate does favors, and the mayor brought up some of that with Bill Thompson, and Bill Thompson said, yes, but on the other hand, if you sort of have a lot of money to give and you are spreading it around to nonprofits, even to political parties,
right,
you are in essence, paying to get to play, and,
right,
and paying off and getting something from it. So there, that can be an issue, and I don't know how much most New Yorkers really, cared about that. They may feel at this particular time when so many people are hurting, perhaps spending that much money on a campaign
just a little obscene.
Seems a little different than it has in the past. On the other hand, again, because he has done so well, and because he seems to be such a good money manager as well as just manager,
right,
there are people who feel he's best able to handle the city at a time when there's a financial crisis.
It's been my observation that after elected officials have been in office for a while, even if they've been very popular, even if they've been acknowledged as being very good public servants, that voters eventually get tired of them.
Absolutely.
That certainly happened with Ed Koch. He was I thought he was a good mayor. He was very popular for a while, but then somewhere in his third term, people just got really sick of him.
That's
and,
right.
He didn't go anywhere, for the fourth term. They soured on him. Are we going to see that happen with Bloom, if he's elected, with Bloomberg, if he's elected for a third term?
We certainly could, because I think we're starting to see it already. I mean, I think there are a significant number of people in New York who feel enough. They are tired of him and who might look for someone else. That's where Bill Thompson had a chance last night with those kinds of people who are looking to see if there is an alternative they can feel comfortable with, and if you present yourself as a reasonable alternative. On the other hand, I mean, Mike Bloomberg is well ahead in the polls, and
where are they now? Do you know what the numbers are?
It's about somewhere around 15, 16-point spread.
Okay.
And the mayor's just over the 50%. He's at around maybe 52 or something like that. So, he doesn't have, overwhelming support, but he is over the 50%, and he probably won't. There won't be that spread, that 15-point spread. I mean, the last time he ran in 2005, he was running 25 to 30 points ahead in the polls, and then he won by a huge margin of about 20, but it wasn't as high as that. And again, that will probably happen in that when people think that their candidate is that far ahead, and it's the incumbent, they don't feel, maybe the need to show up and vote, whereas the people who really want a change or really want the underdog or something are a little bit more motivated, to show up. And so, it may be closer than that. And Bill Thompson may do a bit better, now that he's going to get some exposure.
Do endorsements mean anything? Dennis Rivera, the labor leader, endorsed Mayor Bloomberg, given the mayor's involvement in the health of the city and the nation, and that endorsement was sort of expected. But is it the endorsement that counts, or is it the get out the vote operation?
It's much more the get out the vote operation. At this point, Mayor Bloomberg has so much money that Bill Thompson sort of needs everything else. He needs all of labor and the groups behind him to get out the vote. He will have the Working Families Party.
Thompson will
getting out the vote, and we saw in the primary and runoff, that they are, a force to be reckoned with now in the city, and can certainly be of help to him. On the other hand, we were talking about getting out the vote when, and it amounting to 7% of the people who could possibly vote. They got out some vote more than anyone else did, but it wasn't a whole lot.
How important do you think it is that Bloomberg is running on the Republican and Independence tickets?
Well, there's a reason he did that. He does it because there are New Yorkers who will not pull a Republican lever. They just will not. And so they may want to vote for him, and they're looking for another line to vote for him. And so they may pull the independence line lever, even though it's really the Independence Party. It doesn't just mean independent, but because it's got that word, people may feel a little better about pulling that lever than Republican if they are, diehard Democrats.
And then there are Democrats who just like Mike Bloomberg.
Absolutely. There are an awful lot of Democrats who like Mike Bloomberg. And when we look at polling and his approval ratings and even the vote, he's splitting the vote with Thompson, and even maybe slightly higher than Thompson among Democrats. And he's winning among other groups. And in approvals, I think the most astounding thing about Bloomberg that has been true all the way through is that Bloomberg gets the approval of every single group, of every ethnic group, of every borough, of all groups. This is really unusual, and he still does. He's still getting that kind of approval that's across the board. So even as he's running against Bill Thompson, who is going to no doubt get much more of the African American vote than the mayor will, the mayor's still getting
the bulk of the African American vote?
Yes, the bulk of the African American vote will go to Bill Thompson, but the African American community still approves of Mayor Bloomberg. And so will they be as motivated to go out there as they would have been, for instance, against a Giuliani, whom they really didn't like? I was trying to be a little nicer, but hated. And that, by the way, came up. Giuliani came up in the lightning round last night.
Oh, really?
They asked whether or not he would be a good governor, and Michael Bloomberg said yes. And I think if there was one thing that maybe made a lot of New Yorkers sort of sit up and
what did Bill
notice,
Thompson say?
He said no.
He said no.
On the other hand, they asked about Pedro Espada as well, and whether he was sort of better than Bruno in leading the Senate, and there Bill Thompson said yes, and the mayor said no. And I don't think he's a very popular figure in the city either, but he's not but certainly not in the same way as Rudy Giuliani.
Right. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more with Micheline Blum, Director of Baruch Survey Research at Baruch School of Public Affairs.
Say, are you worried about H1N1? Swine flu. Well, CUNY says protect yourself from hidden horrors. Here's how. After touching public surfaces, don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth. Flu is also spread when infected people cough at you. Sneeze into a tissue, never your bare hands, or use your elbow. Wash often with soap and water, or use an alcohol-based hand cleanser. There are two kinds of flu shots this season. Consult your doctor or healthcare provider on the regular and H1N1 vaccinations. Most importantly, if you feel sick and have fever, stay home. Yes, a little caution goes a long way.
For more information, visit our website, cuny.edu, and click on H1N1 Update.
Welcome back to One to One. We're talking with Micheline Blum, Director of Survey Research at the Baruch College School of Public Affairs. Mickey, during the primaries, what did you think of the fact that some people and some politicians try to make an issue out of the fact that Bill de Blasio, who was running for public advocate, used photographs of his multiracial family on campaign literature.
Well, I mean, it's his family.
Right.
I don't know. What was he? Imagine if he had hidden them and not used pictures of his multiracial family. This is his extraordinarily beautiful family, and he used pictures of them. I mean, I think of course he did. And
it was. I thought it was silly and a cheap shot. And I must say, when I saw his lovely African American wife and his lovely children, that sort of tipped the balance for me. I said, "Boy, I mean, I like people who like black women." So, and it actually changed. I was going to vote for somebody else until I saw that.
No, so. But I think that it is part of who he is, and therefore, I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, as I said, what would it have meant if he had not?
Right.
I mean, I think that's a really cheap shot to say that he shouldn't have. And
why do you think Mark Greene lost?
Well, I think with Mark Greene, first of all, I think he polls better than the actual vote. Always, he sort of underperforms the polling, and that's because I think, while there are people who think he did a good job, and there are people who even who like him, and I don't think there was a lot of passion out there for him. And I don't think there was, there was, name recognition and a recognition that he had done a good job, but he didn't have an organization. There was, as I said, no passion about sort of his candidacy and a raison d'etre. Why was he really running? What was his, the point of his sort of coming back, other than, he was trying to find an office that, that he could win. And I think that, Bill de Blasio was trying to make a case that was more about the future. And he clearly had the organization of Working Families Party. And he and Lou were running almost as a ticket because of the Working Families Party, and because they were getting out, the vote for both of them, and that really worked for both of them.
We're talking about John Liu. Were there any Asians aside from him, who were victorious in the last election?
Yes, but just on I was at a much lower level, on the city council level. Yes, but I think that what you've but this is still extraordinary because it's the first, citywide. I did think it was kind of interesting, as, one sort of looked at, there was a multitude of candidates in the primary, and I think that was one of the reasons people just didn't even know who they were voting for, and sort of, didn't even tune into that, and didn't particularly care because they were at a lower, level. The mayoral contest wasn't a real contest, and the other two were a whole lot of candidates that people probably didn't know very much about and didn't care very much about.
So did another Asian win?
But
do we have other Asians
yes,
in the city council
now? Yes. But I think what was interesting to me then in the runoff was we had John Liu, but we had no women. And there really had only been one woman running for citywide office for, out of all of those candidates. And we had no other people of color. There was no Hispanic running for any of these citywide offices. And I find that very surprising at this point.
Yeah.
And, we now have Bill Thompson running, but so that in fact that the Democratic ticket is much more multiracial, but it's surprising to me that the Latino community doesn't have anyone out there who seems to even who would seem to have been considered as a citywide candidate. It might have been true of Adolfo Carrion had he stayed in the city and not gone to Washington.
Let's switch up to Albany now. Do you see any improvements in the mess in the state government in Albany?
Well, I mean, there was a point at which it couldn't get much worse.
Right.
Perhaps it will improve a little. Certainly, David Patterson has to hope it improves a whole lot, because at this point, his numbers look just awful. And there's such a feeling of wanting to throw out everybody at the state level. Throw out the whole all of Albany.
Send out the clowns.
Just right, exactly. Just get rid of the entire state legislature, because it just has been such a fiasco over the past year. And and David Patterson has really, well, obviously he hasn't done very well, and he hasn't even you've got even the president trying to sort of edge him out, which is, not a great thing. Speaking of which, the president I don't think did Bill Thompson any great favors with the worst endorsement I've ever heard of.
Yeah, yeah.
It's sort of a non-endorsement.
What's your sense, with David Patterson doing so wretchedly, I would expect that the Democrats would put pressure on him to bow out.
Well, I think if it continues, if he doesn't start to do significantly better and start having some kinds of even minor victories up in Albany, I think they will put a lot of pressure on him. But I don't know whether they can force him out. But I think they will try to put some real pressure on him to step down, because it's not in their interest to have a candidate who's that unpopular,
right,
and who's, very possibly could lose to a Rudy Giuliani.
So do you think Andrew Cuomo and Rudy Giuliani are likely candidates?
Very, very likely, and it would be a very lively election if that's what happens. But Andrew Cuomo has played this very well. He's been very smart, and he has not sort of thrust himself out there as a candidate. He's out there, and everybody is trying to get him to run. This is sort of the image, is that everybody wants him as the candidate, rather than that he's trying to push Patterson
he must
out.
love that.
And yes, exactly.
Because I have the sense that he really, really wants it.
Of course, he really, he absolutely wants it, and he is, eager to see, Patterson step down, but he doesn't want to be the one who pushes him out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably particularly true because he ran against Carl McCall, because he doesn't want to be seen as the guy who's always trying to push out the black candidate. Mm-hmm.
Barack Obama's receipt of the Nobel Peace Prize was the big story of the last week. It sent a lot of eyes rolling and got a lot of people talking. What impact do you think it will have on the public's perception of him, on his presidency, whatever?
Well, I think people were surprised. He was surprised. I
wish I could have been a fly on his bedroom when his press aide called and said, "You know what? You've just won the Nobel Peace Prize." I would love to have heard it.
What?
I can imagine. I can just imagine. What his response was.
I think that everyone was surprised. Perhaps not even that he would eventually be a recipient, but that it seemed early.
Right.
That it just sort of seemed like perhaps it was premature and you wanted to wait for certain things to have been achieved. But, I think then seen as something that is just, the changing of the tone and the sort of the hopeful atmosphere that he has brought not only to the country but perhaps to the world, that there is more hope for for sort of getting along in the the world and getting along with the with the rest of the world. I think that that eventually that will, I think, help him, and but I think now he has to kind of live up to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's tough.
It puts some pressure on him.
I think it does put pressure on him. I think it puts pressure on him in peace negotiations.
Maybe it's a good thing.
And in the war.
Maybe it's a good thing.
Maybe it is indeed. And if maybe it will move some things ahead. We can only hope so.
What kinds of subjects are you polling people about these days at Baruch?
Well, we're polling people about all kinds of things, and we have just done we've done some polling even for city agencies. We've polled for NYCHA, and so we've polled people in elderly in public housing.
Any interesting findings from?
Well, I'm going to let them announce most of the findings, but it was very interesting that we did some health polling of the elderly in NYCHA, which was quite interesting.
Your students, do they play some role in the polling? Are they involved in that?
Not as much as I'd like, actually. We have a combination of students and others who come in and do interviewing for us, and I'm always trying to encourage more students to try to come in and work in the lab and actually do some polling. To some extent, we've been a well-kept secret at CUNY, and not enough students have known to come and try and
I would think
work
that
for us.
that taking part in that would have an impact on how they view the political process.
It does. Nobody who actually does that kind of polling and gets on the phone and starts talking to people and and hearing public opinion isn't affected by it and doesn't actually become more politicized. So it's very interesting to really hear how how people think out there.
I would think so. Well, it's been a pleasure having you back. We're out of time. And I want to thank Micheline Blum, Director of Survey Research at the Baruch College School of Public Affairs, for joining me today. For the City University of New York and 1 to 1, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.